Thank you, and thank you for having me today. Super excited to be here. Also, super surprised so many people this morning. Cybergiant, very far. It's very early for that kind of traffic. So thanks guys for coming. Really, really awesome to see you. Cool. So what we're going to talk about today is building your brand on digital. A little bit about my experience on doing this is before Google, I actually worked in e-commerce. I worked for a digital sort of startup that sold, sounds silly, but mattresses online, especially memory foam mattresses, which you might actually be seeing now launching in Malaysia by a few companies. Why this was really difficult and why we had to build our brand is I think you can see people looking at me skeptically. How do you sell a mattress online? How do you sell something that people need to test and try that's also large, you can't really return easily? How do you build a business like that? And then second, from sort of that e-commerce experience, I sort of fell in love with social media and digital. So actually I moved to Malaysia about 6 years ago, and I started working for a independent agency, heading their social media department. And why? Because I love storytelling, I love brand building, and just catching the surface of it, working for an e-commerce, I sort of sparked that love. And I wanted to do it for more brands. So this is just who I am. You can also take a photo and email me later. I'll wait. And we'll be sending the deck later. And just to make sure everyone's really awake and fully here, I'm going to play a video. And you can tell me if you recognize the sound. It wouldn't be a presentation without technical difficulties. Well, while we're waiting, I'm just going to ask a question. How many folks here are an entrepreneur? And where is your target market? Is it Malaysia or elsewhere? Raise your hand if Malaysia. We have more people raising their hand for Malaysia than they did entrepreneurs. And how many are looking to export or gain customers from abroad? I'm sure we're all awake now anyway after the long wait there, but painful a bit. So raise your hand if you remember this sound. This is usually how I know how old everyone is in the room. But it's something that we often forget. For me, internet is such a daily part of my life, and I don't actually know when that sort of transformation happened. I remember as a kid fighting with my brother to actually be able to use the internet, and actually using the internet was using a desktop, and it was one for my whole family, and we would argue and have times like, I get from 6 o'clock to 6:30, and going online was actually often like going to chat rooms like ICQ, AIM, which pretty much are irrelevant today. People now use social messaging, Facebook, Instagram, just very, very different. And even actually back then, Google was not number one. Maybe this reveals my age. But I remember using Ask Jeeves, for example. Bing, Yahoo, and it wasn't like a clear winner yet. So that's dramatically changed the way we work, how we use everyday communication, things like that. So how many times a day do you think Malaysians check their phone? Someone shout out a number loud. Now I hear just murmurs.
5
minutes every 5 minutes? Can you put a number like 100, 200, 10? 100? Yeah? Okay. Oh. 2,600, which is insane. 2,600 times a day we're checking our phone. I've seen for other markets, it's not that high. We're actually very phone heavy in Malaysia. We check all the time. If I don't have my phone, I actually have anxiety. I'm like, where is it? I'd rather lose my wallet than lose my mobile. Another interesting insight is actually that we spend more time actually online than we do sleeping. So Malaysians spend about 7.2 hours online. When you compare that to sleeping, it's about just over 6 hours, which is pretty crazy. And if you think about it, we are constantly connected and attached to our phones. Just a raise of hands, of course, I think everyone will raise. How many people have their phone next to them right now? How many people have their phone next to them within 5 feet at all times? Yeah. So you can close your eyes this time. Raise your hand if you've taken your phone with you to the bathroom. I mean, so it's a very different time. That changes a lot of how we work online. So first off, we have to go with the assumption that people aren't going online, but they're living online. And then we have to sort of shape our stories around that. Especially in Malaysia, even more so than other countries, it has very, very high digital penetration. So if we look at population, it's about 31.6, but the median age here is only 28. It's a quite young country. 65% of the nation is under the age of 35. And when we think of internet penetration, then it's about 83%. That puts it at a very, very high penetration. Similar on board to, for example, Singapore or the US. So that's very, very incredible. So how then do we build our brand, considering it's a digital age? First, we're going to talk about finding your audience online. Second, we're going to talk about converting attention. And lastly, we're going to talk about winning creatives. So feel free to jump out or raise your hand if you have a question or need clarification during. Okay, starting with find your audience. I'm going to tell you actually a personal story of working with a brand in Malaysia. Everyone knows Giant, the grocer? Yep. So they came to us with a problem. They said 25% decline in print readership in Malaysia, but that's actually our core way of reaching our customers. So everyone will recognize on the right the newspaper print ad they have there. And they said basically, how are we going to reach a new generation? And actually, a problem they had as well was they were dabbling a bit on digital, but primarily from the standpoint of creative. So they're doing brand building, that was storytelling, it was testimonials, very cool creative stuff. But what they weren't achieving was getting that reach they needed on their sales products. So what we did is we actually took their newspaper and converted it for YouTube. So what we said is, okay, we know actually that YouTube's reach is about 4x of the newspaper. And there's no reason why you can't take a print ad that would have worked before on a promo and run it on a YouTube network. It doesn't have to be just for storytelling or branding, right? It can actually be for your sales and promos. So the results were actually incredible. We took literally their print ad, the working file, and converted it into a video. And we had a 26% uplift in retail sales for the products that were listed in that video, which is pretty incredible, especially for a traditional retailer. How we decided to do that was actually we looked at different audience groups for them that were most likely to convert. So if you think of audiences on digital, you can think of it as 4 buckets that you can reach beyond sort of demographic. The first bucket being affinities, so this can be like cooking enthusiasts or auto enthusiasts. And these are people who express a certain passion point online. Your second group is in-market audiences. So of course, Google is the largest search engine globally. So you actually can connect data from search to YouTube and target those audiences. So for example, it can be people who searched for Giant recently. It can be people who looked for a Giant grocery near them. It could be people who searched for grocery deals. It could be people who searched, for example, around their store in Shalom for deals, things like that. You can actually customize this. It doesn't have to be exactly what's listed in our platform. You can actually choose the keywords you want to target to reach people who recently searched for that product. We also have consumer patterns. So this can be something like someone who loves deals. We see a lot of data on people who search for 11/11 or Black Friday deals, things like that. You can actually reach that person based on their consumer patterns. So are they someone who frequently looks for deals? Are they someone, for example, we've had one category we created called frequent coffee shops. We have Google Maps data, also, of course, Google owns Waze. So we have data on where people are going as well. So the point here was actually we've been tasked with building an audience group that would reflect that sort of trendy millennial who goes to coffee shops in KL, right? So actually we created the coffee shop regulars consumer group. And then lastly, we have life events. So life events is a trigger point. We see actually that people will start to change their habits online based on certain life events, such as looking for a new home, about to have a baby. So we actually pre-bucket those, and you can target that audience directly. For me, like when working in mattress business, this was great. We know when someone moves home, they're gonna start looking for a mattress. We know they're gonna start upgrading their life, and even actually we had other trigger points we realized, such as getting closer to old age. You actually want to change your mattress because you start to have more back pain. So these were things that really helped us when we launched our brand. And lastly, something a little bit underused is actually location targeting. So if you have a traditional brick and mortar, for example, or you know that your audience comes from a certain part of KL, then it's actually using that location targeting to reach them. And this is actually done by radius, so you can actually not just say KL, but I want to be around this store in Shalom. Okay. Next, we're going to go to convert to action. So this is something very different for Google recently. We've always been known for driving action on search and on display. I'm actually really excited to see so many Google partner signs, and also we had lots of videos playing earlier where they talked about how search drove action for their brand. But from a brand storytelling perspective, how can you do that as well with video? So one thing we've been tasked is how do we do this in a way that builds my brand visually, but also results in conversions? And one thing we heard quite often was that actually, YouTube's great for branding, but no one actually clicks my video and converts to a sale. So we actually went back to our product team on that. We said, hey, to the guys who actually build our products in California, we have a problem here. We have so many people who are watching YouTube, but in a way it becomes just like TV and you become a passive viewer. How do we actually convert them from YouTube to an action on a website or buying a product? So we actually created a new sort of YouTube format called TrueView for Action that's been quite popular with startups globally now. And what we've seen is 150% year-on-year growth in conversions from YouTube just because of this one format, which is really, really cool. And actually, what's different about it is that we have now more shoppable buttons, call to actions, to sort of drive the viewer from beyond just watching your video. Which sounds like a very simple tweak, but also along with it, it's actually bidding on a CPA rather than just bidding on people watching your video. We've seen really fantastic results even locally. So one example was we worked with Clinique just recently, finished this, and for them, they sort of maxed out on getting samples for their campaigns. They said a huge thing for them was actually getting new people to try their product, and that's how they convert them into loyal customers. So we actually took their original video that they used for branding, we edited it slightly to make it a bit more of a call to action, and then we used this new format which has actually really cool call to action buttons on it, and we asked people to sign up for a sample. And in just 2 weeks they had over 1,000 signups, which is really, really good for a luxury brand. And actually we even see that work for brands that are exploring outside of Malaysia. So does everyone know Mind Valley? Yeah? So Mind Valley is a customer we work very closely with. They've had incredible success with this format of True V for Action, especially when it comes to acquiring new users abroad. And how they've done it is actually they've used sort of the video assets they already have, which is really great creative content about their sort of courses that they offer. So for those who don't know, you can compare it a little bit like masterclass, but a little bit different from that. And so they have these sort of videos that explain their product, how great their courses are, and they actually play those. They can be 10 minutes long even, but they have this call to action button. And it's actually resulted in a huge growth in leads for them, as well as conversions just from YouTube. And then actually, the stat here is from what they've used with it, which is actually display ads. So instead of just ending it with YouTube, they actually also had remarketing using their display ads to further drive conversion. Because their idea was those who actually watch the video are likely to convert, but perhaps they didn't click to convert because they were busy watching whatever other content they're watching on YouTube. So they ran these display ads alongside it, and they had a 484% increase in sales and leads, which is huge, especially for a brand of that size. We also worked with McDonald's on this. So this is, I think actually, I always get the pushback that McDonald's is a really big brand, so how can their story be relatable? But actually for me, this one was super relatable because if you're that big of a brand, acquiring new customers is actually really difficult. It's very, very hard to gain more share in such a competitive market, especially when you're already number one, right? How do you win? And so this was actually huge for them. For Ramadan, they actually ran sort of customizable display ads that were targeted based on the time of day for breaking fast. So it was different products in the morning versus different products right before breaking fast time. And then actually, to even further gain new customers, they actually used search to bid basically on those who are searching for breaking fast times. Because their insight was they might not be searching for McDonald's, but they're looking for somewhere to break fast. So why don't I intervene at this point? And so they had a great, as you can see, breaking fast ads with McDonald's. And it was actually different because usually brands will bid on their own keywords only and not think beyond for more generic or competitive keywords. The results were really strong, an 84% uplift in new site visits. From a brand perspective, that's really huge when you're already number one. It's super hard to acquire new customers at that point. So the last thing I always get asked is, what sort of creatives work on digital? And actually, there's been a lot of confusion on that, especially in a market where you have amazing videos from Petronas or TNB. Sometimes you lose a little bit on just doing the normal sort of giant style ads that we don't see as often. And you start to think of it as a real creative showdown on YouTube or on digital. And actually what we see is 3 storylines really work. One that's used a lot, I mentioned, is the more emotional one, which is similar to your TNBs and Petronas. But what's underutilized is actually your functional and actionable sort of storylines. So rather than play the videos, as we had a little bit of an issue with video, I'm going to instead show you the storyline itself. The emotional one is actually about starting high, capturing attention, and entertaining viewers throughout the video. What we actually see less often, but is super important, is functional. And the kings of the functional ads are actually McDonald's. So can anyone guess which ad I'm referring to? I'll give you a hint. Yes. They said chicken, and it's the famous ayam goreng ad where everyone remembers it. When I ask about it, they mention the sound. What people forget is this is not a creative ad in the sense there's no emotional storytelling to it. It's actually very, very functional. And often when I worked in social, people would say, don't put the product up front and center, otherwise they'll skip my ad. But McDonald's ad was all about the product. And then we have our last bucket, which is actionable. This is what you see usually from a Lazada, AirAsia, which is a pure about their sales and just very, very quickly how they will drag you in with the right upfront offer. So I'm just going to break it down real quick. The emotional one, I'm going to share one of my favorites, which is the TNB one from last year. Not this year, last year. I absolutely love it. An important thing is that they started really high, with a high note with the video. So it starts with the kids screaming. The importance of this is that if you're going to be using video online, you need to start with a hook right away. So don't think like a slow storyline, which is actually the way brands usually will build. They usually start very slowly, build the conflict, and then you have resolution. You actually want to start with digital right up front and center with a very, very strong hook. From there, you actually want to maintain connection. So playful music, cues that play with the audience. So for example, in their video, they had fingers popping down and moving the kid. They had really funny little nods to it, things like that. Why? I mean, people can still skip your ad. You have to give them a reason to stay on. Something that you can think about when you build your ad is actually looking at your video analytics to see where people drop off. Are they watching only 10 seconds and then leave, and your main marketing message was at the end? Then you're missing your point, right? So you think either front load it at the top, or think, how do I keep people to stay around for the whole video? Yeah. And then lastly, it's actually having sort of that closing call to action. So brands often forget this. It's either put it at the start in case you're worried about people skipping, or make sure you have it reinforced at the end. So then we have sort of the functional one. It's the same idea of starting strong, but it's actually heroing your product throughout the video. So this is a 30-second video. There are 23 cuts throughout to chicken. That's insane. I mean, that 23 out of 30 seconds you're looking at chicken. And that works incredibly well. In normal TV advertising, you would actually only have about 8 cuts. You also wouldn't have the cut to the product so soon. You would actually sort of build up a story and then reveal it. But in this case, it starts from the top. As a viewer, you know it's an ad, but that's okay, right? You want to share with people your product. You want to make them want the products. You want to make it heroic throughout the video. An interesting thing for digital as well is making sure you do that very up close. So it wasn't just that they had the idea like, oh, let's do chicken very up close. It's actually that we see that that drives results. So unlike, for example, TV or other platforms, you're watching on a very small screen, so 5 inches usually, as compared to 55 inches. So you need to make sure that framing is very, very up close so people understand what they're seeing. And lastly is using bright colors, and sound as cues. Of course, people when they're watching YouTube have sound on, so they play with that a lot in the video. Rather than doing supers or voiceover, it's a lot on that crunch noise to drive the product. This is an example of an actionable ad. This is also a little bit underutilized on YouTube, but also drives results, especially when you pair it with, for example, that action-oriented format I mentioned. So what you want to do is right up front have your deal. If you have a promo going on, don't leave that to the end. That's the most important message you want to get across. Have it from the start. What's also great about it is if somebody skips your ad, they're actually still seeing your promo. This is a really awesome way for you to get extra reach and impressions on your promo without paying for it, right? So I mean, if you're thinking, oh, my click-through wasn't great, that's actually not a problem. Think how many impressions you achieved on this, right? So then second, for those who don't click through, for those who do click through and are watching the ad, you want to give them more reasons to buy. So what is Lazada, similar to the giant one we shared, will actually showcase the products throughout. So if someone's already staying on because they're like, oh, a deal, I'm interested. Next, you want to show what can they buy with that deal. You see this from a lot of clothing brands, for example, Zalora, or I see Style Theory often in Singapore when I'm visiting. And it's basically a showcase of the different products. A way to think of this is kind of like bringing your carousel ads that you might be using on social to life in video. So what would be the main takeaways from this? Work to find your audience. They're online. So it's really then just finding where they are. We already know they're there. It's finding the buckets that they fit in that are most likely to convert for you. The second is thinking a bit holistically about your marketing funnel. So we mentioned that YouTube is often seen as branding, but actually you can also use it to drive action. So thinking about how do I take just my long form video, but also use it to actually get signups or convert to shopping. You've seen actually people buying products straight from YouTube videos even. Third is how do you get the right creative? So you're running video, but actually it's a two-part project. It's not just about buying the media, it's not just about getting seen in the right audience. If you don't have the right creative, it won't convert. We especially see that for action-oriented video. So if you're running an emotional ad, but you're expecting them to sign up, then you have a disconnect in your marketing message versus the format you need to be pushing. So with that, I'd like to actually open up to questions, especially as we have a 5-minute sign in the back. Any questions? Or any challenges that you guys are facing? Yes?
How do you address the different languages that is for Malaysians? Because like when you market, it's different for Malay, different for urban, different for Chinese. How do you address that?
So you actually have different browser settings for YouTube. So from that, then we can target by language. Generally, what we see is for mass brands, they'll go Bahasa and English only, unless they have a sort of inkling that they have a strong Chinese base, then they'll also do Chinese language ads as well. Yeah. Or it can be similar to McDonald's, where actually it's just crunching noises. There's also different ways to think of it. So from a creative standpoint, a lot of times it's actually, you can do similar to McDonald's one where you don't need actual talking in the ad, usually where you add cost. And then you can actually close your end screen with a different language and target based on that. Any other questions? Oh, on the screen. Sorry, I did not see that. Yes, we can get a copy of the presentation slides. And actually, if you're looking for more on storytelling, we actually have a creative hub on Think with Google, where it has all the formats plus our creative best practices for video, which is actually super, super useful. Offhand, I don't know the percentage of conversion for the Mind Valley remarketing ads. We do have one of their case studies publicly available on Think with Google, and that you can see actually the full case study there. And actually, I think it's a really great one because I think it's a good example of growing your business beyond your borders. So one of their biggest markets is actually US. So it's really cool to see that they went from being somewhat smaller niche sort of company to actually being much broader. And actually, they're one of the fastest growing YouTube channels now in Malaysia. A simple tweak that can bring in thousands of conversions. How much is the campaign spend? So I wouldn't think of it as that you need a certain minimum spend to convert. For me, actually what I've seen is that if you target more precisely lower audiences, then you'll actually have higher conversions. So if you're running a format that is designed for action, but you target the whole of Malaysia, the results will not be as strong. But if you're targeting, maybe you have a CRM platform and you're looking for small business owners who might have been looking for a CRM, if you target those who recently searched for that on Google, you're going to have a high likelihood of conversion. I don't think of it as a budget. One thing when I worked agency side, I had a conception that the idea that you need a lot of budget to be on YouTube, that's actually not true. And I've seen campaigns that do well with just 1,000 ringgit a day max, or even less. So it's less about a total budget to start with and more about tracking your conversions. Similar, actually, you can say to search. So if you have a CPA that you like, think of that, then maybe 2x the starting point, and then optimize from there. What's the best duration to create a video ad? So it depends on your creative. So TNB would not be able to drive that sort of emotional storytelling if they did it in a 6-second ad, right? They just would not be able to do that. Instead, it's a 4-minute ad. We actually see people do complete it. So if you have the right story, people are willing to stick around and watch it. Now, if Lazada had tried to do a 4-minute ad out of a promo, like the one I shared, it's just not going to work. People aren't going to care enough to watch for 4 minutes. The main message you actually just want to get across is actually the promo. So you can do that usually in 6 seconds, which will actually be more cost efficient to you because that's a cheaper format than a long form video ad. What is the mattress company name? We've changed names. It's similar to Casper Mattresses is what I'll give you the hint on. You can also find it under the word Zen Bedrooms or eDreams. Very, very similar. We started in the UK and we're trying to export to US and rest of Europe. What is the suggested budget allocation? So that's a hard one to say. It depends if your goal is to acquire new customers and grow your reach, or if you're just trying to convert people at the end, so you're starting niche. It depends on your priority. So I think that is the last question, as I have a sign in the back that says time's up, so I want to be mindful for our next presenter. When we send the slides over, you'll have my email address, so you can always reach out for questions as well. So, and I'll stick around as well after. So thank you guys again for your time today. Enjoy the